Well, thank you very much. And I actually went the other day through my papers from the Constitutional Convention in 2002, 2003, and I came across the notes where we talked about whether there should be a clause to leave. And I remember I found this sort of rather aggressive little note from the Foreign Office which says, this is not a Foreign Office priority. And I argued, but I thought it was a priority for Parliament. And what was interesting is what swayed them to include a clause which allowed to leave was actually Giuliano Amato, the Italian vice president who was a former prime minister of Italy and a very, very good constitutional lawyer. And he essentially said, to leave at the moment would be left to treaty basis, which is unclear, and if you want to have clear rules, you must define them. And therefore he agreed that we had to have a clause. And then they created Article 50, which later on, which wasn't meant to be clear. However, I think we need to sort of, just a few quick reflections. One is, if you'd said to me on the 23rd of June in 2016 that in the 1st of November 2018 I'd be sitting in here discussing how we're going to leave, I would have said to you, you are stark raving mad, you know? But we are here, and it tells us something, and it tells us something that when you want to bring about change, which goes against the will of actually fairly small, but nevertheless very vociferous establishment, then that is really painful and it is hard work. And you know, we mustn't give up on this. And one of the things which I prepared for coming here, or just look back on, is that after the referendum, we made a big strategic error, which was we thought over to the government and they would implement it. So we kind of went back to our party political roots, whereas the main campaign continued to work as a Remain. And the government wasn't rebutting stuff. So we as Change Britain went out and did a lot of polling and focus groups. And I just went back to this stuff because in polling what matters are trends. And the thing, there's a bit of churning, but I tell you what's out there is nobody out there has changed their minds. This notion of the, what was it saying, 100 and odd leave, well, I want to know where they are. The March for a Second referendum, how many there were there who said, I voted leave and now I've changed my mind? I can't find any of them. So it is essentially a regrouping of those who are refusing to accept the outcome. And the reason why this is so dangerous for Labour in particular, I mean, refusing to accept the outcome actually is just as dangerous for the Tories, but I care slightly more about the future of the Labour Party than about the Tory Party. They can sort themselves out, is the example of Scotland. It is perfectly possible for a party that is deeply entrenched to be wiped out. And what we saw in Scotland with the rise of the SNP, I don't know about UK, I mean, when we came in, Scotland was so dominated by Labour, the thinking came out of Scotland, and suddenly, you know, we come back after the general election and there's one Labour MP left in Scotland, and there are these 56 SNP MPs there. And a lot of theirs actually wasn't yes, the Scottish nationalism had something to do with it, but it was their very socialist narrative. And we shouldn't forget about that. We shouldn't forget our roots, because if we forget them in England, then we've also got a problem. And the core constituencies where you had not many public sector workers, largely white population, and no university. These are the kind of places which have always been our Labour seats, and these are the ones which we're in danger of losing. And the reason why we're in danger of losing them is twofold. It is on the one hand the current Labour narrative that goes out, which is sort of very North Islington based, which, you know, I'm sorry, once you get north of the M25, that is not what they want to hear from their Labour Party. And the second one is that we have allowed Labour leaders in particular to be demonised. The kind of language which comes out, which sort of just said they're all old, they didn't know any better because they weren't terribly bright, and they're all racist. All our polling which showed is that what they were worried about was the pressure on the public sector. It was the pressure to plan for what you needed to provide. It was the starvation of money which allowed them to provide for everyone. People, in my experience, are by far more reasonable than they're given credit for. And the other thing which is really being underestimated is the real anger that's out there. Yesterday I had a meeting and I went down Regent Road, and usually when people sort of at Regent, usually when people talk to you and they're not sure, they sort of check that you're the person they think you are. But this guy just came up to me and went, "You have no idea how lonely I feel." And I was going, "Really?" And he said, "If you're a Brexiteer in Mayfair, you really feel as if you're the only one. But I work in Wales most of my time, and whenever I go back to Wales, you know." And I said, "Don't worry, there were 17.4 million of us. There may have fallen silent. And the challenge for us is not just to implement the outcome of this referendum, but just remember why the Labour voters voted. They didn't want to leave behind." One stat, 1/3 of the population in England still lives and works in the place they were born in. So this notion of that it's all about London, no, forget about it. And I don't want the Labour Party in England to happen what happened to the Labour Party in Scotland. And if we don't remember our roots, it could very easily happen that the Labour in England becomes the Democrats of the United States. It becomes something which is kind of rights-based. It's based in our cities. Well, if I want that, I vote Lib Dem. And I don't want to do that either.